Now we're going to use a program called ImageJ to do some image analysis for us. For example, dimensions of our pellets. We did these, Antonio and I did these for you in the lab, and then what all you have is the photos. And so you want to know the dimensions of your pellet, so things like diameter and thickness, but all I've given you is photos. You don't have the calipers in front of you. So I'm going to use this software, which is free and provided by the NIH, to show you how to do this image analysis very simply, so that you can get all of the dimensions that you need during this lab. So the first thing I want to start with is how to actually get this. So go to Google or whatever search engine and type in ImageJ. I don't know the website off the top of my head, but just search it. So this is ImageJ. Before I click it, I just want to point out something. So this again is through the NIH. So this website up here you can see is imagej.nih.gov. So only download it from the .gov website. Don't try to download it from other websites you see down here. This is like a .net. I can't verify any of the other ones except for the NIH website. So make sure you use that when you download this image processing tool. So I'm going to click on that website. Very simple, not a lot going on, which is okay. We're not trying to make the flashiest website. So go to download. And then select whatever operating system that you have on your computer. So I would select Mac OS if I needed to install it, but some of you may be using Windows computers. That's fine. There's versions for that, and also Linux if you happen to be running that. So click on that, download everything you need to do, follow the instructions. There's instructions here if you need to do that, but start with that. Download it, install it, make sure everything's working properly, and then I'm gonna start with a demo of how to do some of this analysis on my version, which is Mac OS. So when you're sort of following along, keep in mind that my buttons and file locations and all that may be slightly different because it's OS versus Windows, so just keep that in mind, but we'll go from there using Mac OS, and then if you have any challenges with Windows or something, just let me know and we'll go from there. We've downloaded ImageJ. We have it on our computer, and so I'm going to go through the procedure and how we can process some of these images that you're going to have in the coming days. So down here, I'm going to click on ImageJ. So open it up, however that is on your computer, and you'll see a little bar up here at the top with some different options. But the first thing we want to do is open up an image to actually analyze. And so you can do File Open and search it that way. So I can go File Open and go through my documents and find out where it is. Also, you might try drag and drop, because this will work on some computers. So if I drag and drop the image from the folder I already have up, you'll see that it opens here. So however you need to do it, but open up the image that you want to process. All right, so now you'll see that I have the one of these images that you're going to have for dry pressing, just images of the pellet in its various states. So this was a YBCO powder that had been pressed at 5,600 pounds. And this is the pellet, and it's showing you the sort of top face, and then with a ruler up here. So this is very important. We've included scales in the form of some type of ruler on all of the measurements and all of the pictures that we've taken. If not, discard that. Don't worry about it. All right, so this is just like our micrographs that we've done earlier in the semester, where we have an image, for example, of a steel microstructure, and on the bottom, when we take it with a microscope, we'll have a scale bar, right? And that scale bar will say 10 microns or whatever those units are. Same thing here. We have a ruler, and that ruler is telling us what the scale of this image is, because we don't know without that scale. And so the first thing that we're going to do is put that onto the image, basically set our scale for this image. And so I have the ruler, and you can see here on the top, this is in millimeters, and it goes from 60 to 150, right? So you can kind of see that part of the ruler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the line tool. So up here it says straight segment. This is just a straight line. So you want to select that, and then come back down here to the image and try to be as careful as you can and draw a line from a known distance. So for me, I'm going to, give me a second here. I'm going to select the distance from the 60 to the 150 mark in millimeters, right? And I'm going to try to make that as straight as possible on the ruler, and feel free to zoom in on the image and so forth if you need to do that to really get the scale set up correctly, right? So I've drawn a line, and so the computer knows how many pixels that line is, right? And I know that this line goes from 60 to 150, right? So that is 90 millimeters. All right. So I've basically set a scale. So what I'm going to do is go up here to Analyze, and then select Set Scale. So this is where I set my scale. And again, the options here to go through this, distance in pixels. So you'll see that there's something already there. You'll see this big number, right? That is what the computer has set for this line. So since I already set a line, that line is over 2000 pixels long, right? So you don't want to adjust that. That's set by the line that you make in the image. What you do want to set is the known distance. So that known distance, like we just calculated, is 90 millimeters, right? So I'm going to put 90 in the known distance. The pixel axis ratio, aspect ratio should be 1. Just keep that set there. And then the units, it doesn't know what units you're using, so you have to tell it. And so we want millimeters. And so when I do this, then down here you see the actual scale. So this sets it 24.2668 pixels per millimeter. So if I draw another line now, the computer knows, based on how many pixels that line is, how to convert that into our units of millimeters. So this is how we effectively set the scale. And so I'm going to click this OK button, and now the image is set up to start measurements. All right, now we are ready to actually make the measurements of the dimensions of this pellet that I have here as an example. I want to apologize. The background in my house is pretty loud. Apparently, I just heard the cat upstairs meowing because I think she's stuck in a room. So I apologize for that. So bear with me. These videos are being recorded at home. So all right, back to the video. So I've set the scale, and now I'm going to take some measurements. So I've got the image open here, and here here's the pellet that I want to measure, for example, the diameter, right? That way I could calculate the volume of it. So a couple things, other things that we'll want to know about ImageJ that might help us. So you can see that the pellet is rather small in the image, and so we might want to blow it up or zoom in. And so you'll see the magnifying glass here. And so you can select that and click to zoom in. So that's one thing you might want to do if it's not big enough. So you can zoom in. So I strongly encourage you to do that. You could also use the command keys on your computer. So this is basically plus minus on my version. So if you just hit the plus or minus arrows, you can zoom in. And so feel free to use those as you go throughout this image. Okay, so now it's quite big, and so I'm going to take my measurements, and all I'm going to do there is what I did before. I'm going to click on the line, So I clicked on the line tool, and now I'm going to find the line that I want to measure. So for me, that's the diameter. So in this case, I'll go from the very top to the very bottom. All right. So there's my line. And so now, if I want to measure this, again, the computer knows what the length of this line is in pixels, and then we've set the scale so it knows what it is in millimeters. So what I'm going to do is go back up to analysis and hit measure. So you can also use the control keys. So for me, this is Command M. It might be Control M on Windows, but you can also use that feature as well. And so when you hit that measure tool, you'll see that it pops up with a results table. And so let me just sort of go through this with you. So the first entrance here, first row, is 1. So this is the first measurement we make. It records an area, but that doesn't make sense for this line, so disregard it. Same thing with mean and minimum and maximum. Don't really worry about these for the line. It can be more useful in other types of measurements that you make. But the last two are things that you might want to pay attention to. So angle, this kind of tells you the angle at which that line occurs. So this could help you sort of backtrack in case you forget which measurement you're making. And then, again, just tells you what angle with respect to the image that you have. So this one is about minus 90 degrees. So that's more for a reference point. You don't really have to record these for results. But the one thing I will draw your attention to is the last one. So this is the length, right? So we measure the line, we want to measure the length. So this is really the important part that you have. And so I've chose the diameter of this pellet, and it's saying it's 13.050, and the units that we set up are millimeters. So this is 13.050 millimeters. So that is what our diameter is. And this makes a lot of sense. The die that we're using is a 1/2 inch die, and a 1/2 inch is about 12.7 millimeters. So 13 seems to be pretty well on that measurement. Keep in mind that the die can often be a little bit bigger, or the pellet, if it expands out of the die, may be larger than the die itself. And so just because it's not exactly 12.7 doesn't necessarily mean there's an error. But as everybody's sort of getting these measurements, you'll have different people doing different measurements, and so you'll have an error associated with different people making those measurements. So we just recorded the diameter. Again, that's you can do this for other measurements. If I open up an image with the thickness, I can do the same thing to be able to get the thickness of the pellet, and therefore I could get the volume. Another thing I would recommend is to make these measurements in multiple directions and angles. So here I could go across the diameter. There is some chipping on this sample, so be mindful of that. But if I again select this line now and hit Command M and make another measurement, you'll see down here, this is my second measurement. Again, disregard the first 4 entries, and then angle. So this is closer to horizontal. And then the measurement in that direction is 13.191. So you'll want to try to be as careful as you can when you measure these to try to get an accurate representation. Also keep in mind if there's any sort of angle associated with the where my camera was. So if it isn't perfectly perpendicular to the plane of this pellet here, then you might have to account for that as well. Make sure you get sort of edge to edge, but do it in different measurements. You'll also have different teammates doing this lab as well, and so they'll get different measurements taken, and so you can kind of give it an average diameter or average thickness of what you have. But again, keep in mind that there's going to be error along the way with the device you have, so the ruler, it's only going to be as accurate as the ruler that we have, and also you're making these lines, so there's error associated with how good the image quality is, and so forth. But so that's how you process, and that's how you get the links that you'll need for these pellets. I will have images of the diameter and also the thickness of all of these pellets for you to do this analysis. And so same thing, go through each of them, set the scale, and then measure the diameter and measure the thickness of your pellets. And you'll do that as you get this photo data from dry pressing and from after sintering and so forth. So use this. Hopefully that's a good sort of tutorial on how you can use ImageJ to measure the dimensions of your pellets in these photos that you'll be given with this ruler scale bar that you have. So that's all I have for this. So make sure you're going through the data and doing this process. And if you have any questions, please let me know.